Hey, Mike here. Haven't done any videos in a couple of weeks. I was doing some copper spinning there for a while, and as you can see, I put a new condenser on the refrigerator. There's the old condenser there. Don't know what to do with that thing. This is 50 feet of 1/4 inch copper tubing. There are 16 of these stainless steel posts, all cut by hand and drilled on a drill press. It's all soldered together. A lot of the soldering's kind of bad. I can explain that, the reason for that here soon. This thing was intended to have a metal skin, just like that sheet metal skin that's over there. For various reasons, I did not put that on there. I'll get into that here too. Decided to do kind of a more or less a complete rebuild on the fridge there. I moved the compressor to the center, had to repipe everything, kind of clean things up a little bit, lowered the kind of the control panel here to make it a little easier to work with. Still just the 10 feet of 026 capillary tubing. Have all the same sensors on there, the pressure transducers and whatnot. So the construction of this thing, boy, it was tough. I would never try to attempt to build something quite like this again. Not in this style. Because I have however many, 16 or so holes there that all this copper needs to be fed through, I had to cut all these stainless steel sheet pieces out of a sheet. It's 24 gauge. I cut it with snips, basically large metal shears, big scissors. Then I stacked everything, marked where all the holes were going to be, and then drilled them all at once. But because the copper tubing has a slope to it, there's a downward run about 1/2 inch for every wrap, there had to be a 1/32 offset between this hole and the adjacent hole, and then that one to this one, and so on and so forth. So I had to offset all the stainless steel plates whenever I drilled them. Quite the bear, pain in the ass. And then all these holes all lined up, and then you can see that I bent this on a brake. There's holes on the inside and the outside. Those were intended to receive rivets for sheet metal skin. It would have looked pretty cool with a sheet metal skin just with the rivets, but honestly I think it looks better like this. You can kind of see the guts of what's going on here. Assembly of this thing was a pain in the butt. So imagine putting a key on a key ring, and you have to slide it 1 or 1.5 turns around to get it on or off. Now imagine if you had 16 keys that you had to put on that key ring. You had to do it all at once. You feed the first one on, second, third one, fourth, all the way up to 16, and then spin them the whole way around, then start over again, around and around and around. But rather than have to do 1 or 1.5 turns, you have to do about 16. So you have to feed the first, the copper into the first hole, the first hole, the second one, and so on, till you get to the end, and then the second hole, the first one, the second hole, the second one, and so on and so forth. It took a long time, and it took more than one attempt. Initially, it was going to be 3/16 copper tubing. What happened was it kind of got jammed up, and I had to pull it apart, drilled all the holes out, about a 64th over 3/16. Tried it again, was relatively successful. I got to something that looked similar to this, but it had a hell of a taper to it. Because the copper tubing, I didn't make sure I had the same diameter as I went along, and I think it kind of it shrunk a little bit. So I cut all those pieces off because I couldn't get it apart. The stainless steel had completely galled up and boogered up all the copper tubing, so I'd be damned if I was going to try to thread it all off, and the copper tubing is pretty much junk anyway now. So I cut it apart. Because I couldn't get any more 3/16 tubing around town, I just went to 1/4 inch because it's a lot more available. It was actually cheaper. And I had to drill all the holes out again. And this time I went for a 32nd over rather than a 64th over nominal tubing size. And it made it a little easier to assemble. I didn't use soap like I did the first time. And I kind of built a half-ass jig to help me kind of keep things even. I still ended up with a taper. The diameter at the top is about 1/2 inch smaller than the diameter at the bottom, so everything tapers inward. So trying to jacket it with a skin like that is extremely difficult because it's kind of got a semi-cone shape. It was going to be too much of a bear to try to wrap it, tape it, mark where all the holes are going to be, drill the holes, attempt to rivet it. Just forget about it. So I said, screw it, I'm just going to put it on as is. and then I can play with just a taped on sheet metal jacket then, and that's exactly what I did. All in all, there's probably 15 hours of work in this thing, just getting it to the point where you can see it right now. So initially I ran the thing. I got a lot better, a lot lower head pressure for a given ambient temperature, better subcooling, probably in the range of 23 to 25 degrees of subcooling, as opposed to about the 10 that I was getting before. And all in all, everything's running at a lower temperature on the high side. It's still not as low as I think it should be for a static condenser. But there's some ways that I can address that here in the future whenever I build another one. So whenever I tried to put a jacket on this thing, as I would expect, I got a nice draft coming up from the top there as the copper warmed the air and the air rose, pulling air into the bottom. That was the original intention. What I found, though, was even though I had a draft going, there was actually some air, and if I held like a lighter flame up to the bottom, it was actually pulling the flame in. I mean, there was a reasonable draft. It wasn't enough of a draft to really do any kind of significant cooling. My head pressure went up, saturation temperature on the high side rose, and my subcooling improved a bit. My delta T across between the saturation temperature at that pressure and the subcool liquid coming out improved to like 26, maybe 27 degrees. But all in all, it was at a higher temperature and at a higher head pressure, and I can't see how that is any kind of a benefit. So the jacket really was a detriment. Initially, I just put a jacket on the outside because I didn't have a piece of stainless or a piece of sheet metal for the inside, and then I just took a couple pieces of copy paper and taped them together and fitted it to the inside, so I had this annular space. I wouldn't do it that way. So all in all, it's a success. I just kind of wanted to review what it is, and I think it's kind of neat. If you're thinking this kind of looks like a monitor top DR, then you're probably a nerd. I didn't intend for it to look like that. I think it's kind of nifty that it turned out that way. It just happens to be a pretty simple, basic, design. It's just a matter of trying to find a way to construct it is tough. So I have some ideas on how I want to do it in the future, where rather than drilling holes and trying to feed the copper tubing through it, I want to drill holes in stainless steel posts and then use a shear to just rip the holes right down the middle. So you have two semicircles, and then I'll have from one post I'll be split into two posts, and then I'll be able to fit the tubing that I wrap against those posts and then solder it that way. So I have some different ideas for jigs and stuff that I can do that. And it also might allow me to return to my hyperboloid shape, where I could actually draw a hyperboloid shaped line on a piece of stainless steel and then mark and drill all my holes on that and then use throatless shears to trim it. So I have to experiment a little bit with trimming those holes to see how much it boogers up the stainless. I don't want it to get all wacky wonky, but I think I have a method for redoing this here in the future, but I'm just going to let it run for a couple of weeks. I have an absorption refrigerator that I'm going to attempt to build here in the next few weeks, so I'm just going to let this thing chill, no pun intended, chill my beer and my cat meat in there. It's not made of cat, it's for cats. And today I'm just playing with some metal spinning, so that's another video. Thanks for watching.